Hi, thanks for joining us at the Azure VMware Solution Hands-on Lab walkthrough. My name is Trevor Davis. I am with Microsoft and I'm a technical specialist for Azure VMware Solution. Imad?
Thanks, Trevor. My name is Ahmad Yunus. I'm a staff cloud solutions architect at VMware. I lead the VMware Multi-Cloud Center of Excellence. I have a personal blog, ahmadyunus.com, and you can always reach out to me via Twitter at Ahmad_Yunus. So today we're going to go through the hands-on lab, and we're going to walk you through how to configure a AVS private cloud and also establish all the connectivity that is required. Now, if you want to follow along, or if you want to take the hands-on lab at any time, because they are 24/7, feel free. There's a link here below that you can go to. It's a short URL that takes you directly to a page dedicated for AVS HOLs, and that's hol.pub/AVS. And with that, we're going to jump right in. As you can see here, we're at the landing page that I was talking about earlier. And here you get an overview of the AVS solution. And also there are a couple of hands-on labs. Now, the migration lab that you see here is fresh right off the presses here. We just got it created, and it walks you through all the configuration needed to use HCX and migrate. But before you do that, you actually need to deploy a private cloud, and that's what this session is about. So we're going to click on Take This Lab, and I am going to log in. I'm going to provide my credentials and provide my password. And now I'm logged in, so I'm going to click Enroll. And I'm going to start the lab. Now, this screen here is if you've never taken a hands-on lab before. It goes through and tests your browser compatibility. If you have, you can go ahead and start the lab. And as the lab is going, you'll see that the manual over here pops up to give us an introduction of the lab itself. As we walk through, there's a lot of good information here. Myself and Trevor were content leads for this lab. Here it tells you what the first module is about. And here is a good overview of what the Azure VMware solution is. Now, here on page 5, this is where you're going to click to open the actual lab. So we're going to click that link. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the intro to the lab. We have a slide that Trevor and I worked on that indicates the private cloud. Now, Trevor, we have private cloud on-prem, but we also have private cloud in AVS. So not to add confusion, do you want to kind of address private cloud in AVS?
Yeah, so Azure VMware Solution, which is a VMware SDDC stack, which I believe at this point all the attendees have gone through a detailed kind of explanation of what AVS is, but it's referred to as a private cloud. So so there's the Azure VMware Solution private cloud, which is actually your VMware stack inside of Azure, and then there's also your on-premises environment, your on-premises private cloud. So not to confuse the scenario, but there are overlapping terms.
So as you can see here, we are walking through the connectivity from your on-premises, which will require an express route, as well as the VNet configuration that we're going to do in our networking. So all the underneath plumbing that's required. as well as a Azure subscription. So let's jump right into the lab itself by clicking on the screen. Here we're at a desktop, your typical desktop. I think it's probably Trevor's desktop. And we're going to go ahead and click on the Azure portal. Now I'm going to log into the Azure portal. I wouldn't use that email address to email me. It probably goes out to the ether somewhere. Once we land on the main page, just like any other service in Azure, AVS is no different. So we're going to start by typing and looking for the Azure VMware solution. There it is.
Hey, Matt, I got a quick question. So if a user is doing this hands-on lab, how do they know what to do? How do they know what steps to take in order?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on the right-hand side, there is that guided lab manual. Also, if you get lost at any time, the orange box is an indicator of where you should go. So as you can see here, this box is highlighted around the Azure VMware solution that I would click on. You can use your mouse, or you can use your arrows key to guide both forward and backwards. So now that we've got our Azure VMware solution, here is the page where if we had any private clouds deployed, we'd see them here. But in this case, we don't have one, so we're going to create one. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select our subscription. And if you don't have a subscription, well, you need to make sure that you have a subscription. Now, Trevor, is it just any old subscription that will work here? Like if I went and just signed up and had a test subscription, will that work, or is there something else that's required?
No, like all Azure services, there needs to be a quota assigned to the subscription, and because of the cost of AVS, we make sure your subscription by default has no quota, so there's not any by accident deployments. So what the user has to do is open a support request and request a quota be assigned to their subscription. Once the quota is assigned, at that point, we can start doing, or the user can start doing what Imad's doing here.
Got it. So we're going to select our production Consulto Azure VMware solution subscription, but I just got this error message. And as you can see from the error message, it's not related to the subscription. It's actually related more to the location. So in this case, because my location says US East, my allocation or quota was really in US West. And now you can see that the error message is gone. So the subscription is and your allocation are also tied to a particular location. Next, we're going to create a resource group. Now, Trevor, having worked on VMware technologies for a long time, I see resource group, and the first thing that pops into my mind is resource pool. Mm-hmm. Are they similar? Are they different? What is what?
Yeah, no, your resource pool is definitely something different, right? And resource group in the context of Azure is more of a grouping of items within for organizational purposes. So what we see customers typically do when they're deploying Azure VMware solution, there's ancillary things that need to go along with this. They may deploy a virtual network as well, because a new express route, a new express route gateway, things like that. And so they'll just put everything into a resource group. So if you're coming from the VMware world, think of a resource group as just a logical grouping of things that all go together. They don't have to be in the same region. They don't have to be the same services, et cetera, et cetera. It's for organizational purposes.
Got it. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and give this a name. We'll call it prod AVS RG, and we're gonna click OK. Now that we have our resource group created, we have a resource name. Now, the resource name is just the name that you're gonna give your private cloud in AVS. So, here, name it something that's more meaningful. Now, Trevor, if I give it a name now and I want to change it, can I change it later on?
The resource name is kind of forever, for lack of a better term. And it is just a friendly name. It has no bearing on functionality in any way. So it is just for organizational purposes.
So basically choose wisely as you're creating the name, right? Okay, now we're gonna get to select the SKU. Now, during the time of this recording, there is only one SKU available, but from my understanding, and Trevor can definitely confirm, is that there'll be more SKUs available in the future. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, as more SKUs become available, they will be available here in this dropdown.
Got it. And you can get more details about the SKUs in the AVS documentation of what the hardware specs are for each particular SKU. Once we select our SKU, you can see here that by default, we got 3 nodes available to us. Now, the bare minimum for an AVS deployment is 3 nodes. You can scale up, but you cannot scale below 3 nodes. So let's say, for example, we scale up to 4 or 5 nodes. We can always scale back down, but we cannot pass the 3 node minimum. Now, also the other thing I want to mention here when it comes to the host is it's also determined by your quota. So depending on your quota will determine if you can actually add additional hosts. Next, we're going to enter in our vCenter password. Now, it does have a set of criteria that we have to adhere by, somewhere between 12 to 20 characters, numeric characters, special characters, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put in our password, and we're going to type it in again to make sure that it matches, and I didn't fat finger anything.
So while Imad types in the password for vCenter and NSX Team Manager, at the time of this recording, this was the way it was deployed. You may, during deployment, not see vCenter or NSX Team Manager passwords being prompted for, which is okay, because in the future or the very near future, maybe even when you're watching this video, we'll have switched to an auto-generated password, and then you retrieve that password in the Azure portal. So again, if you go to deploying, this screen will be exactly the way it is right now, with the exception of the password fields.
Less typing, the better. Makes it easier, and I don't have to fat finger anything. Okay, so now that we got our passwords in, the next step is this address block. And this address block is what's going to be used as part of the deployment of the private cloud. So this is what's going to take care of the vCenter IP address, the NSXT, the appliances, things like that are going to leverage this CIDR block as part of the management configuration for our private cloud. Now, the private cloud needs to have an address block that is non-competing with our on-prem environment or our Azure environment, and it has to be a /22 network. So Trevor, can I pick a different type? Like, can it be a /24, or is this /22 a hard requirement?
Yeah, the /22 is a hard requirement. What's going to happen is the automated deployment of this cluster is going to take that address block and it's going to chop it up into different smaller address spaces and use that for the varying management components, your host, your vCenter, your vMotion network, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice. Okay, so I think, we have everything configured. We're ready to move on to the next screen. But Trevor, we also have this virtual network here, and we're not doing it now. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it is, and should we do it now, or did we, is it
Yeah.
okay to do it later?
Yeah. So you have during the deployment this this drop down available to you for virtual networks. So if, as you probably know, or as you may know, Azure VMware solution to have connectivity out, we connect an express route that comes bundled with Azure VMware solution to an Azure VNet, just like any other express route would. So if you have a virtual network and a virtual network with a gateway subnet already created, but without a virtual network gateway, you can then select this drop down and select that virtual network. If you don't meet that criteria, then we just do this as a manual step after the deployment of the private cloud, which is maybe a 2 to 3 minute process. So you don't have to do it during deployment, but if your environment meets the criteria, you can, as part of the automated deployment, connect Azure VMware solution to your Azure VNet and how immediately have connectivity to the rest of Azure. And in
Cool.
our scenario, we're not going to do it during deployment. We'll do this as a manual step afterwards to show you all the details.
Sounds good. All right, so we're going to click on tags. Now, again, as a VMware person, tags in this notion, are they the same thing as tags you'd find in vSphere, or do they have any other implications?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. I know tags are used for varying things, not only just identification in a VMware environment, but here it's very, very similar to what you would use tags for in a VMware platform in terms of organizational need. So you don't have to assign tags, but because this is an Azure service like any and all Azure services, you can assign names and values for your tags like you would anything else.
Okay, so they make it easy for me to find everything later on.
Correct.
All right. So
And
let's
people do
go.
use it for billing purposes and things like this, right, to try to understand what costs what. So.
Okay, so now we're going to confirm that everything we've done is good to go. Everything looks good. So we're going to click Create. And just like that, well, not just like that, right? I mean, this is more kind of like a cooking show where, we put one in the oven and pulled the one that we had baking for a while right out of the oven. This process takes roughly what, 2 to 3 hours?
Yeah, about 3 to 3.5 hours. But while that does sound like a long period of time, think of what's happening, right? The hosts are being deployed, vSphere is being laid down on them, vSAN is being configured, vSAN is being encrypted, HCX is being deployed, HCX on the cloud side is being configured, right? And so compare that to what you would do on-prem, from unboxing the server to actually getting a functioning cluster, right? It's a fraction of time.
Well, you can even take it a step further, right? I mean, not just unboxing the servers, but procurement of the servers.
Yeah.
I mean, on-prem, when I need servers and I go to my management and say, hey, I need more resources, that process itself can be anywhere from a 3 to 10 plus month process before I even get the budget or even the servers on site, where here, once I have quota, it's a click of a button and I have a data center all stood up.
Very true. And as you grow this environment, or as you need to grow it, you can add hosts, and that is, roughly a little under 30-minute process to add incrementally additional hosts to this cluster.
We're charging all this to your credit card, by the way. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go to the resources that we just finished deploying. You can see here from the screen in the overview that we saw the resource group name that we created. We see the location, our subscription that we leveraged, and here is a breakdown of the /22 CIDR network that was used. So we can see that our primary peering, our secondary peering, our cloud management and vMotion network, along with the number of hosts, are all visible here. Let's go right into the resource group. All right. Now, Trevor, do you want to walk us through how to create a virtual network?
Yeah, sure. So like we were saying before, right? So at this point, just to level set, we have the private cloud deployed. So you have, in this situation, we have a 3-node cluster that's deployed, and I kind of like to describe it as it's an island there, right? It's running, but it has no roadways to get to it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to build that roadway. We are going to connect the express route that is bundled as part of the Azure VMware solution to a virtual network and a network gateway. Now, sometimes customers end up building a brand new virtual network. Sometimes customers connect to an existing express route gateway they already have. At the end, it's the exact same process if you're connecting to a new express route gateway or an existing express route gateway, but just for purposes of detail, we're going to go as if this is a vanilla environment. There is a bare bones environment, has no virtual networks, and we're gonna create that virtual network. But in many cases, you already have a virtual network. So we'll hit the add button there, and in the top left, and we're going to do a search for a virtual network in the marketplace.
Okay.
Select that, and we're going to create that virtual network. All right, and so here we're going to give the virtual network a name. This is just a friendly name, that we want to call it, and then click the next button to enter the IP space that we want to use. We're going to modify the default slightly. Again, in your environment, you would do what's appropriate. We're going to put in a /24 as the address block, and then we're going to add a subnet to it. And so, and we're going to give the subnet a name, and we're going to give the subnet an address range. So for VMware folks who maybe aren't familiar, what we have essentially done here is we've said 172.168.99/24 is an address space. Now from that address space, we are going to create subnets within that address space, and then we can use those subnets for our workloads. So here, we have Ahmad's filled in the rest of the information. You see he's done 172.168.99.0/28, which is a subset of the /24, and he's going to go ahead and hit add here, which is going to create that subnet. Then we're going to delete the address space that we're not using. And now here the next step is we're going to hit security. Just to go to that next screen, we're going to take the defaults there. Again, this is an Azure resource, and with all Azure resources, put in tags. Ahmad's going to go ahead and type the appropriate tags we want here. Again, this is, your mileage varies in your environment here. You may or may not use the tags. Review and create, and then we're just going to go ahead and deploy that VNet.
So Trevor, what we just did, even though we started out on our local machine and I was able to hit the Azure console. What we just did is now going to allow us eventually to be able to connect to the AVS private cloud, or is there other steps that are still required for us to do this from my local machine?
Yeah, no, there's multiple other steps that we're going to have to do for your other machine. What we're doing now is we're just creating that virtual network that we're going to then attach that ExpressRoute gateway from AVS to. And once we do that, you're going to be able to get from Azure into your SDDC, but not from on-prem. That'll be we'll show you how to configure that at a later step.
Got it. All right, so it looks like we're ready to create. And ta-da, we have our VNet.
Yep. So yeah, VNet's created. We're just going to hit go to resource like you would do with all other Azure resources, and it'll bring you over to your virtual network. So here we're gonna add a subnet, and if you click on the subnets on the left-hand side, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add. I'm sorry. Let me take a pause there. So if we go back, what we actually looked at there is we clicked on subnets, and now you see that if you go ahead and click on subnets again. Go ahead and click on subnets. Now we see the prod AVS subnet that we actually created a step ago. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a virtual network gateway. So we're going to do a search for gateway. We're going to select virtual network gateway. And what this virtual network gateway is for the VMware people out there is this is what the ExpressRoute from AVS will actually grab hold of and terminate to. We're deploying this into the virtual network. So we're going to go ahead and create that virtual network gateway. Then we're going to, like all other things, we're going to give it a friendly name. We're going to change the gateway type to an ExpressRoute gateway because that's what it is, not a VPN gateway. The virtual network, if we pull that tab down, we'll see that there's the virtual network we just created a step ago. So we'll select that. So what we're saying is take that virtual network and deploy this virtual network gateway, or what we're going to use as an ExpressRoute gateway, into that virtual network. So then it auto-populates a suggested subnet range for the subnet that is going to be created in that virtual network for that virtual network gateway. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, we're just going to give the public IP address a name. This again is a friendly name, and then once we do that, we're ready to deploy it. Just review and create. We're not going to do any tags on this one.
Tag all the things.
That's right. Then create, and another screen's going to come up, which will look very familiar, that the resource has been deployed, and then we'll go to the resource. Okay, so now, now the virtual network gateway is deployed. So now what we have to do is we actually have to connect that, take that ExpressRoute from Azure VMware Solution and connect it to that virtual network gateway that we just created. So we'll go back to the resource group. And we just pop back to the resource group because it's an easy jumping off point. Then we're going to go to our private cloud that we created. All right, and then once you get into the private cloud, you're going to see on the left-hand side there's a series of tabs. We're going to want to select the connectivity tab or the connectivity blade, and then select the tab there that goes across the top that says prod AVS or that says ExpressRoute. And what we're going to do here is we're going to request an authorization key. And what that, while Ahmad does that and presses that request authorization key, let me just explain what it is. So what we're going to do is that authorization key will allow us to claim or allow us to terminate this express route to that express route gateway that we just created. So we're going to go ahead and request an authorization key, and this again is just a friendly name that we give it.
All right, gave it a name.
Yeah, and then create, and now the authorization key is there. So now what Imad's going to do is you're going to copy this authorization key. So go ahead and click the copy, and we're going to what Imad there just did was he just used the breadcrumbs there to go back to the virtual network gateway that we created. So now we'll switch to that tab, which is that virtual network gateway. So what you see here is that VNet gateway that we created. And now what we're going to do is we're going to claim that authorization key on this virtual network gateway. So hit connections there. And we're going to add a connection. So again, we're going to give it a friendly name. And we're going to change the connection type where it's not a VNet to VNet connection. It's an express route connection, which says to this this connection is that, hey, I'm going to be receiving an express route, not a VPN or anything else. So we're going to redeem the authorization by clicking that check mark, because remember, we've just created an authorization key. We're going to paste that authorization key that we had copied into that authorization key field. Then we're going to pop back over and we're going to have to get what's called the peer circuit URI. So that's what's the express route ID there. So Imad's going to copy that, go back over to the connection, and then paste that in, and then hit OK. Once he hits OK here, what that's doing is that virtual network gateway is then going over to that express route and saying, here, attach here. And now we have connectivity from the virtual network, which is the larger component. Then within that virtual network, we have a network gateway deployed, an express route gateway, and then that express route now comes over and attaches to that. So now we have connectivity from that virtual network over to Azure VMware solution.
Opening that additional tab was definitely helpful.
Yeah. So now Imad's going to take us through just deploying a virtual machine, and we're going to kind of speed through this just for sake of time. But this next step is really just your typical deploy a virtual machine into the virtual network. And why we're doing that is because now that we have connectivity, and while Imad kind of goes and searches virtual machine to get it deployed, I'll kind of talk us through this a little bit. Why Imad right now is deploying a virtual machine into that virtual network is so he can then, and we can test connectivity from that virtual network across to Azure VMware solution. In customers' typical environments, they're going to have a virtual machine probably that already is hanging around in that VNet somewhere, or that they can move into that VNet. And then they'll use that just to grab a web browser on and then hit Vcenter just to make sure, hey, it's there, everything looks good, etc. So this is kind of an optional step, but because our environment has nothing and we're deploying everything from scratch, we need to put a virtual machine inside that virtual network. And that's what Imad's doing now, and that's why you're going to see him select the same virtual network, same subscription, same resource group, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, here we're just selecting the size. Now I didn't have to pick, as Trevor said, I didn't have to pick a Windows VM, but as long as there is a VM that has browser capabilities, we want to just make sure that we've established connectivity to our private cloud and can hit our Vcenter. So here I'm giving the account that's going to be used to log into our jump box.
Yeah, and that's a good point. What we're actually deploying here is a jump box because we don't have connectivity back to on-prem yet.
Yeah, this is, at least in my opinion, this is just a temporary way to get in, because once you have global reach, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, then I can hit everything from my on-prem environment and I won't really need this jump box any longer. This is just, again, an interim step to get you to make sure that everything you've done is actually working correctly.
Correct.
All right, so let's make sure that everything looks good. We're going to look at our disks. Depending on what you want to change, you can change the disk type here and the encryption type, but I think we're good with the defaults. We're going to review our network configuration here. Definitely always good to make sure that you're connected to the right VNet, also the right subnet as well. So here it looks like we're good. And we're going to skip the rest of them and just do the review and create. We'll scroll through this step.
And again, for folks out there, right, this is being deployed into the virtual network that our virtual network gateway was deployed to, and that's so to use, and and that's required so you can connect to AVS, right? If you put it into another VNet that has no connectivity to this VNet, then you won't be able to connect to AVS.
All right, so our jump box deployment is complete. We can see all green check marks, and that's always a good sign. We're going to go back to resources. Now here we're at the overview of our AVS jump box that we just deployed. We're going to click connect. And as part of this, we have three options. We can use RDP, SSH, or a Bastion, similar to a console. Since this is a Windows machine, we're just going to RDP in. We're going to download the file to our local machine. Now, Trevor, up at the top here, it says to improve security, enable just-in-time access on this VM. What does that mean, and what does that give us?
This is just an Azure security feature. So if you noticed when Imad deployed this, we opened the RDP port. And if you want that port only to be opened or opened on demand, then you can enable that feature right there.
Got it. All right, so we're going to download the RDP file. I'm going to save it to our local machine. And now I'm going to go back to the private cloud, and we're going to click on identity. Now, this screen is an important screen because this is where you'll find all the information about your Vcenter login and your NSXT manager login. So you can see here, I have the URL for access to Vcenter, also the same for NSXT. I have the username and password as well. So again, this is definitely one of those blades that I would say is important. You'll probably come in here frequently. We're going to copy the Vcenter admin password. We're going to note that the account here is cloudadmin at vsphere.local to log into our vCenter. We're going to minimize this page, and we're going to RDP in. These are just typical RDP settings. Now, the account that we're using here, this is the account that we created when we were creating the jump box, if you remember a few minutes ago. So just using that same account password that I created, we're going to click connect. And sure, we're going to connect anyway. Logging in. So this is a good sign. At least we know that the login works for the jump box. Now we're going to try to attempt to go to our vCenter server. So here we're going to put in the IP address of the vCenter server, which was 192.168.8.2. And we're going to click enter. And of course, we're going to continue. And the good news is we've hit the vSphere getting started page on vCenter. So we're going to go ahead and go to our HTML5 client. And this is definitely looking really good because we're able to hit our vCenter. We're going to log in, again, using that cloud admin at vsphere.local credentials. And we are going to paste the password that we just copied in. And as you can see here, we're logged into vCenter in AVS, and you could look at the suffix here, avs.azure.com. So we are definitely in a vCenter that is in our private cloud. We're just going to expand this cluster out a little bit, and we have 3 hosts that are part of this private cloud. Now, we've just now finished the deployment and the initial connectivity to get us into our private cloud inside of Azure. So Trevor, you want to walk us through what we're about to do next?
Yep. Yeah, so what we've established here is that diagonal line from the Azure VNet over to AVS, that diagonal blue line. What we're going to do in the next step here is we're going to establish the global reach connection, which is going to allow for connectivity from Azure VMware solution back to your on-prem environment. So let's get started doing that. Here we click on the screen as it says to skip past this. Okay, so where we are here, just to orient everybody, is we're on through the magic of demo, we are now on a machine on your on-prem network. So we've gone here, we've logged into the Azure portal, right? We've gone to our Azure VMware solution, we've gone to this identity tab, and we're going to go ahead and copy that vCenter web client URL and paste it into a new browser tab.
Yeah, I can't hit vCenter like we were able to in the jump box.
Yeah, and that's because we don't have that global reach connection set up. So well, let's go ahead and do the setup, and then we'll test this out again at the end.
Well, let me ask you this: is there anything required, like any, prerequisites that I need for this global reach?
Yeah, so what you have, the prerequisite is that you do have an express route coming from your on-prem environment into Azure. So if you already have that, then you can do this. If for whatever reason you don't have an express route coming from on-prem into Azure, you can then, in lieu of this, just direct connect a VPN into AVS.
Yeah, but the VPN route won't let us use HCX, which we'll cover later on.
That's correct. That is a limitation of VPN at this moment, which is the ability to leverage HCX for workload migrations.
Got it. And for the express route, it could be from Microsoft or from a partner, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there are a whole host of partners out there that people get their express routes from. So if you have an express route going into Azure, you're good to go.
All right.
So what we're doing searching here is we're going to search for that express route circuit we were just talking about. So in our lab scenario here, that express route is coming from our on-premises lab into Azure. So we're going to go ahead and go to that resource. So in your scenario, this would be your express route that's coming from your data center. We're going to go ahead into the authorizations tab over there on the left. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create an authorization. This is just a friendly name. And why we're creating this authorization is, if you remember, when we connected the Azure VMware Solution Express Route to a VNet, we had to go and grab an authorization from that Express Route. Now here, we're grabbing an authorization from the Express Route that's coming from on-prem.
All right, I just gave it a name and I saved it.
Yep. So now, now that you've saved that, let's go ahead and pop back over to the Azure VMware Solution Private Cloud tab there. We're going to go to connectivity. And here we see the ExpressRoute Global Reach tab. So on the left, remember, we used the ExpressRoute before. Now here we're going to use the ExpressRoute Global Reach tab. So go ahead and click that.
Hey, before I click on this, I see this internet enabled.
And disabled.
What is this? Well,
yeah, so,
internet enabled and disabled, that's right. So
yep.
What does this provide me? Is this internet connectivity to our virtual machines?
So what that specifically is allowing you to do is giving or not giving internet access from the virtual machines that are running inside of AVS. So by default, internet is disabled. So if you were to deploy a virtual machine on your private cloud and then try to surf the web, you wouldn't be able to do it. It's very different from the machines being exposed to the internet, because you can do that by standing up any host of Azure resources to front end those virtual machines. So they're very different. You can block outgoing access by disabling this, but grant incoming access through native Azure services.
Got it. All right, back on track.
Back on track. ExpressRoute Global Reach. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to claim that authorization key by hitting add. And now what we have to do is let's go back over to the other tab. Remember, we've created an authorization. We're going to go ahead and copy the resource ID of the your on-prem express route, come back over here and paste that into the tab as shown, or into the field as shown. We're going to go pop back over, and we're going to actually copy the authorization key that we created, paste that authorization key in there. What's going to happen here is, now that we've pasted it in there and Imad hits create, what it's going to do is it's going to establish a global reach connection between the express route that's coming out of Azure VMware Solution and the express route that's coming from on-prem, thereby allowing connectivity between AVS and your on-prem environment. So now you see the state says connected. We'll go ahead and close out that other browser tab.
So now we can try to connect to the vCenter directly from our on-prem machine. Okay.
Because if you're like we said at the beginning, we're doing this from an on-premises inside a customer data center environment. So yeah, we're going to now go ahead and try to hit that URL again, and you see that we did do that. And we'll go ahead and launch the vSphere client. We remember the username from before. It's cloudadmin@vsphere.local, but we're going to go ahead and paste in the password and log in. And remember, if you need to go and get that password, you go back to the AVS portal screen to grab that.
So now Trevor, I think I'm gonna, now that we're logged in and we're on-prem, I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can reach this via ping.
Yep. And so, for everyone watching at home, right, this is from an on-prem environment.
So let's see, I got my terminal. So let me ping, there's the name. It works, which is awesome. But, I do have a question. We established all the necessary connectivity. I don't need the jump box anymore now that, the global reach is working, but we didn't do any kind of DNS configuration. So I'm just, amazed that I'm able to ping this without any kind of entry?
Yeah, so there are configuration parameters in the Azure portal that we don't show in this demo that can be configured for DNS forwarding, and that you can take your on-prem DNS servers forward to, et cetera. So yeah, so there are some DNS modifications that have to be done, but we do enable that through the Azure portal.
Got it. Well, I think we've walked everybody through how to deploy a private cloud and all the necessary connectivity that's required, not only inside of Azure, but also to an on-premises environment. I think the next step is to start looking at how to migrate workloads. And like we stated earlier, we have a lab that's ready for you. The URL is hol.pub/avs. It'll take you back to the landing page that we were on earlier, and you'll be able to do the secondary lab, which is workload migration with VMware HCX. If you have any questions or comments or want to see something else, feel free to reach out to me and Trevor out on social media. Our Twitter handles were at the beginning of the presentation. And with that, we want to end this by sharing some resources with you. We've already talked about the hands-on lab. We have an overview page for AVS, also the documentation as well. There is an introduction blog that I've written, and I got some more in the works around AVS, going into more details, kind of like what we did here in the lab, where you're guided, but there's still pieces of information we want to add on, so go a little bit deeper. Trevor's done a nice job on some introductory AVS videos as well. We also have some HCX information. Even though we didn't walk through the lab, it's definitely important to have this. The ports and protocols URL, the HCX documentation, and the release notes. These are definitely 3 pieces of information that are key to your success with using HCX and AVS. And with that, we would like to thank you for attending this session and look forward to seeing you in future events. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Trevor and Emad. That was our last session. We're at the end of the AVS Partner Bootcamp. From everyone at Microsoft, we greatly appreciate your time and hope this event has provided useful information. Recordings of these sessions, session presentation decks, and other supporting content will be available at the above URLs. Again, thank you for attending. We look forward to working with you in the future.